There's a plant growing in ditches right now that has more protein than soybeans, more iron than spinach, and can be turned into 5 different foods including a cheese substitute that actually tastes good. You've probably never heard of it, and there's a reason for that. It's called duckweed, and the fact that it's not in every garden center in America is one of the biggest agricultural mysteries of the last 50 years. Stick around, because what you're about to learn might change how you think about protein forever. Let's get the shocking part out of the way first. Duckweed, that tiny green stuff floating on ponds that looks like someone spilled green confetti on the water, contains up to 45% protein by dry weight. Soybeans, they top out around 36%. Beef, about 26%. This little plant that most people consider pond scum is producing more protein per acre than almost anything else you can grow. And it does it faster with less water and basically zero maintenance. Now you're probably thinking this sounds too good to be true. That's what everyone thinks. There has to be a catch, right? Well, yeah, there are catches, but they're not the ones you'd expect. And understanding why duckweed isn't already taking over the world tells you everything you need to know about how food systems actually work. Spoiler alert, it's not about what's best, it's about what's profitable to sell. But before we get into the conspiracy theory part, let's talk about what duckweed actually is. There are about 37 species in the duckweed family, and they're the smallest flowering plants on Earth. Some species are barely bigger than a grain of rice. They float on still or slow-moving water, anything from ponds to ditches to rice paddies. Each plant is basically a tiny leaf with a single root hanging down into the water. Here's where it gets interesting. Duckweed reproduces insanely fast, embarrassingly fast. One plant can create a daughter plant every 24 to 48 hours under good conditions. That means you can start with a handful of duckweed and have enough to cover a small pond in a few weeks. The doubling time is faster than almost any other plant you can name. Bamboo gets all the credit for being fast-growing, but duckweed makes bamboo look lazy. This rapid growth is why the protein content is so high. The plant is constantly producing new cells, and cells are made of protein. It's not storing energy as carbohydrates like most plants. It's just building more of itself as fast as possible. The result is a plant that's almost half protein, with all 9 essential amino acids that humans need. And it's not just protein. Duckweed is loaded with vitamins. Vitamin A, several B vitamins, vitamin C, and vitamin E. It's got minerals too. Iron, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium. The nutritional profile is genuinely impressive. If you designed the perfect plant food in a lab, you'd probably end up with something close to duckweed. Now let's talk about the 5 foods you can make from it. This is where it goes from interesting to actually useful. First up, fresh greens. You can eat duckweed raw. It tastes like mild lettuce with a slightly grassy note. Not amazing, but not terrible. The texture is the bigger issue. It's slimy when fresh, kind of like seaweed. Most people mix it into salads or smoothies rather than eating it straight. A handful of duckweed in a fruit smoothie adds a massive protein boost and you barely taste it. The green color gets a bit more intense, but that's about it. Second, dried powder. When you dry duckweed and grind it into powder, you get something that looks like matcha and acts like protein powder. This is probably the most versatile form. You can add it to anything. Bread dough, pasta, soups, sauces, smoothies, protein shakes. A tablespoon of duckweed powder gives you about 3 to 4 grams of protein. That's roughly the same as a tablespoon of peanut butter, but with way more vitamins and minerals. Third, protein extract. This is where it gets technical. You can process duckweed to separate out the protein into a concentrated form, similar to whey protein isolate or soy protein isolate. Grinding, and then using water or mild solvents to extract the protein. What you end up with is a powder that's 70 to 90% protein. It's bland, it's neutral tasting, and it can be used exactly like any other protein powder. Bodybuilders could use this. It's that concentrated. Fourth, and this is the weird one, duckweed can be fermented into a cheese-like product. Yeah, you read that right. Plant-based cheese from pond scum. When you ferment duckweed protein with the right bacteria, the same cultures used for making cheese or yogurt, you get something with a tangy, creamy texture. It's not going to fool anyone into thinking it's aged cheddar, but it's way better than most vegan cheese alternatives. The protein structure in duckweed actually holds up well to fermentation, creating a product that melts, spreads, and has that slightly funky fermented flavor people associate with real cheese. Fifth, livestock feed. But hear me out on this one. Technically, you're not eating it directly, but if you're growing chickens or fish and feeding them duckweed, you're converting plant protein into eggs or fish protein. This is huge for backyard homesteaders. Chickens love duckweed, fish especially tilapia and carp. Go crazy for it. You can grow duckweed in a kiddie pool, harvest it daily, and feed it fresh to your animals. Free, high-protein feed that grows itself. So if this plant is so amazing, why isn't it everywhere? Why aren't there duckweed farms on every corner and duckweed protein powder in every grocery store? This is where we need to talk about agricultural economics, and it gets a bit cynical. First problem is perception. Duckweed is pond scum. It's what you skim off your fish tank and throw away. It's associated with stagnant water and mosquitoes. Getting people to eat something they've been conditioned to see as waste is a massive marketing challenge. Imagine trying to sell bottled water in the 1970s. Selling duckweed as food in 2025 has the same energy. Second problem is harvesting. Duckweed grows on water, which means you need water to grow it. For large-scale production, you need ponds or tanks. You're basically skimming it off the surface with nets or screens. There's no combine harvester for duckweed. No industrial equipment that makes it cheap and easy. Small scale, it's fine. You can harvest enough for personal use in a few minutes. But scaling up to feed thousands of people, the logistics get complicated fast. Third problem is processing. Fresh duckweed is about 95% water. That means for every 100 pounds you harvest, you get about 5 pounds of dry matter. Drying it requires energy. You need heated air or sunlight and space and time. Then you need to grind it, package it, store it. All of this costs money. Soybeans are way easier. You grow them on land, harvest them with machines, dry them in silos, and process them in facilities that have existed for decades. The entire infrastructure is already built. Fourth problem is regulation. At least in the United States and Europe, duckweed isn't classified as grass. Generally recognized as safe for human consumption. It means it hasn't gone through the expensive and time-consuming approval process. Getting grass status costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and takes years. Nobody wants to invest that kind of money in a product they're not sure will sell. Fifth problem, and this is the big one, is that there's no money in it for big agriculture. Duckweed can be grown by anyone with a pond and some sunlight. You don't need to buy seeds every year. You don't need fertilizer. You don't need pesticides. You just need water and light. Once you have duckweed, it perpetuates itself forever. That's amazing for home growers and small farmers. It's terrible for companies that make their money selling inputs. Think about it. Monsanto can't patent duckweed. They can't genetically modify it and charge licensing fees. Fertilizer companies can't sell you nutrients for it because duckweed pulls nitrogen and phosphorus directly from the water. Pesticide companies can't sell you chemicals because duckweed doesn't really get pests. It's a closed system that doesn't require outside inputs. That's the opposite of how modern agriculture works. The entire industrial food system is built on selling inputs and controlling supply chains. Duckweed breaks that model. It's too easy to grow, too easy to share, and too self-sufficient. There's no recurring revenue stream. So even though it's nutritionally superior to a lot of conventional crops, even though it uses less land and water, even though it grows faster and requires less labor, it's not being pushed by the people who control agricultural development. That sounds conspiratorial, but it's just economics. Companies invest in technologies that make them money. Duckweed doesn't fit that model. So it stays niche, known mostly to aquaculture nerds and off-grid homesteaders. But here's the thing. You don't need to wait for big agriculture to figure it out. You can grow duckweed right now, in your backyard with minimal investment. And maybe you should, because the benefits go beyond just protein. Let's talk about actually growing it. You need a container that holds water. Could be a pond, could be a stock tank, could be a plastic kiddie pool, could be a large bucket. Size doesn't matter much. Even a 5-gallon bucket will produce usable amounts of duckweed. Fill it with water. Rainwater is ideal, but tap water works if you let it sit for 24 hours to off-gas the chlorine. You need nutrients in the water. This is where it gets clever. Instead of buying fertilizer, use waste. It's loaded with nitrogen and phosphorus from fish waste. If you have aquariums, use that water instead of dumping it down the drain. Don't have fish? Use diluted urine. Yeah, seriously, urine is an excellent nitrogen source. Dilute it about 10 to 1 with water, and your duckweed will explode with growth. Composted manure tea works too. Basically any organic nitrogen source. You need sunlight or grow lights. Duckweed grows best with about 12 hours of light per day. Direct sun is great, but too much heat can stress it. If you're in a really hot climate, some afternoon shade helps. Indoors under grow lights works fine too. Those cheap LED grow lights on Amazon? Perfect for duckweed. Temperature matters, but duckweed is surprisingly tolerant. It grows best between 60 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, but it can survive down to freezing and up to 95 degrees. It just slows down at the extremes. You can grow it indoors during winter and move it outside in summer. Now here's the maintenance schedule. You add water when it evaporates. You harvest when it covers the surface completely. That's it. No weeding, no fertilizing beyond the initial nutrients, no pest control. Duckweed is one of the lowest maintenance crops you can possibly grow. Harvesting is simple. Use a fine mesh net or even a slotted spoon. Skim the duckweed off the surface. Leave about 20% behind to regrow. The 20% you leave will double in a day or two, and then you can harvest again. In warm weather with good nutrients, you can harvest every other day indefinitely. What do you do with what you harvest? If you've got chickens or ducks, just toss it to them. They'll devour it. If you want to eat it yourself, rinse it thoroughly. Duckweed grows in water that might have algae, bacteria, or other microorganisms. You want to rinse it well before consuming it. For fresh use, add it to salads or smoothies the same day. It doesn't store well fresh, goes slimy and unappetizing pretty quickly. For longer storage, dry it. Spread it thin on screens or trays in the sun, or use a food dehydrator at low temperature. Once it's completely dry and crispy, grind it in a blender or coffee grinder. Store the powder in an airtight container. It'll keep for months. The powder can go in basically anything. Mix it into flour when baking bread. The bread comes out with a slight green tint and a nutritional boost. Add it to pasta dough. Stir it into soups at the end of cooking. Blend it into smoothies. Mix it with water and drink it straight if you're brave. A teaspoon of duckweed powder in your morning smoothie gives you a solid hit of protein and vitamins. For the fermented cheese product, you need a bit more setup. Take fresh duckweed. Blend it with a small amount of water into a thick paste. Add a probiotic culture, either from a yogurt starter or from actual yogurt. Let it ferment at room temperature for 24 to 48 hours. The bacteria break down the proteins and create that tangy flavor. Add salt to taste, maybe some nutritional yeast for extra cheesy flavor, and you've got a spread that works on crackers or sandwiches. Now let's talk about the science that makes this work. Because understanding why duckweed is so protein-rich helps you grow it better. Plants make protein from nitrogen. Most plants pull nitrogen from the soil. Duckweed pulls it from the water. In natural ponds, nitrogen comes from decaying organic matter and animal waste. In your growing system, you're providing it through fish water or diluted urine or compost tea. The faster a plant grows, the more protein it generally contains. Because growth requires protein synthesis. Duckweed grows faster than almost anything else, so it's constantly cranking out proteins to build new cells. It doesn't waste energy on deep roots, thick stems, or complex flowers. Every bit of energy goes into making more leaves, and leaves are protein-dense. The amino acid profile is particularly interesting. Duckweed contains all 9 essential amino acids, the ones your body can't make on its own, which is often lacking in plant proteins, is well represented in duckweed. The protein quality is comparable to animal proteins, which is rare for plants. Most plant proteins are missing 1 or more essential amino acids. Duckweed has them all in decent amounts. There's also been research into using duckweed for bioremediation, cleaning up polluted water. Duckweed absorbs excess nitrogen and phosphorus, which are the main pollutants in agricultural runoff. Some cities are experimenting with duckweed systems to treat wastewater. The duckweed cleans the water and then gets harvested and turned into animal feed or fertilizer. It's a closed-loop system that solves multiple problems at once. For home growers, this means you can use duckweed to clean up nutrient-rich runoff from your garden. Got a rain barrel that's getting algae because of nutrient buildup? Add some duckweed. It'll outcompete the algae and clean the water. Then you can harvest the duckweed and feed it to your chickens. You've turned a problem into a resource. The potential for duckweed in developing countries is enormous. In areas where protein malnutrition is common, duckweed could be grown in simple ponds with minimal technology. It doesn't require expensive seeds, fertilizers, or equipment. A village could maintain a communal duckweed pond and harvest protein daily. Some NGOs are working on exactly this, introducing duckweed cultivation in parts of Africa and Southeast Asia. But even in developed countries, for home gardeners and homesteaders, duckweed makes sense. It's a space-efficient protein source that requires almost no input. A small backyard pond can produce pounds of fresh duckweed per week during the growing season. That's enough to supplement your diet or feed small livestock. The reason nobody talks about it is the same reason nobody talks about a lot of traditional or indigenous foods that don't fit into modern agricultural systems. There's no marketing budget behind it. No company stands to profit from you knowing about duckweed. It's not sold in stores, so you won't see ads for it. It doesn't require specialized knowledge to grow, so there's no expert class promoting it. It just exists, quietly, doing its thing in ponds around the world, while everyone focuses on the latest superfood that costs $20 for a tiny bag. This is one of those situations where the solution has been around forever, but it's too simple and too free to get attention. Duckweed has been eaten in parts of Asia for centuries. It's a traditional food in Thailand, Laos, and parts of China. They call it different names, but the concept is the same. Free protein growing on water. Western agriculture just ignored it because it doesn't fit the industrial model. But now, with more people growing their own food, with concerns about sustainable protein sources, with the environmental impact of soy and animal agriculture becoming clearer, duckweed is getting a second look. Small companies are starting to produce duckweed protein powder. Research institutions are studying it more seriously. It's slowly gaining traction. The question is whether it'll ever go mainstream, or whether it'll stay a niche thing that homesteaders and sustainable agriculture nerds know about. My guess is it stays niche, at least for a while. The structural barriers are too high. But that doesn't mean you can't benefit from it. You don't need it to be mainstream. You just need a bucket and some water. So if you've got a sunny spot and you want to experiment with growing your own protein, try duckweed. Start small. A 5-gallon bucket, some fish tank water, and a starter culture of duckweed that you can buy online for like $10. See how fast it grows. Harvest some and try it in a smoothie. Feed some to your chickens if you have them. You've got an interesting conversation starter. Best case, you've added a sustainable protein source to your garden that requires basically zero work. Thanks for watching. If you want more videos about plants that should be way more popular than they are, subscribe. There's a whole world of useful species that nobody bothers to market because they're too easy to grow.